Speaking of people who should know better because they claim to lay hold on the scientific method and leading people astray, I offer into evidence Rand Paul, as he has done so many times throughout the pandemic, sowing the seeds of misinformation and simultaneously trying to convince everyone that he is a scientific voice that should be listened to. Let's take a listen to Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky.
Don't you understand that it's presumptuous for you to be in charge of all the science? Have you ever heard of a second opinion? I can't go to my doctor and ask my doctor's opinion. I mean, this is incredibly arrogant, combined with this authoritarian nature that you think, well, we'll just tell all of America to do what I say, and they better, or we'll fine them, or put them in jail, or not let them go to school, or not let them travel. The science is against you on this. The science is clear. Naturally acquired immunity is as good as a vaccine. The Israel study actually showing it better. This isn't an argument against the vaccine, but it's an argument for letting people make a decision who already have immunity. You're not willing to consider natural immunity?
Senator, our team has reviewed every study that's out there on COVID, whether it's from Israel, from the U.S., or wherever else. They have used the facts that have been provided through the rigorous research that's been done to reach a conclusion. 660,000 Americans and more have died because of COVID. We're trying to do everything we can to save as many as possible. We're using the facts, we're following the science, and following the law.
The second voice was HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra. I just the absurdity of it. Dr. El-Sayed, what are your thoughts?
I mean, he is trying to make an argument against the vaccine. That's exactly what he's trying to do. And the thing about acquired immunity is that you know how you acquire immunity without getting a vaccine? You get sick. So he's actually advocating for people to get sick from COVID-19 so that then they can't get COVID-19 again. Kind of defeats the purpose, especially given the fact that you have a safe and effective vaccine that gives you immunity without having to get sick in the first place. And here's the point, right? If you're healthy, yes, you may take your chances of getting sick with COVID-19, but you don't know that you're not going to pass it to somebody who's not and that they're going to get really sick. And on top of that, you don't know that if you get infected with COVID-19, that you're not going to be one of like the 30% of people who end up having long COVID. And here's the crazy thing. There are people who have asymptomatic COVID infections that then become symptomatic over time. And they have these odd symptoms like, memory loss and brain fog. And so my point is if you have a safe and effective vaccine that is free at the point of care, that can prevent you from getting sick and vastly decrease the probability that you make other people sick without the potential long-term consequences that 30% of people who are getting infected face, why in hell are we advocating against it? And here's the thing, right? You got to always ask what's in it for them. Well, you know what's in it for Rand Paul? He's got a base of people who've been politicized and misinformed by the former president, and they see it every day on Facebook, and he's trying to play to them because he thinks it ups his political standing in Kentucky. And if we want to have a political discourse dominated by a bunch of misinformed, politicized people in Kentucky, then we can keep listening to Rand Paul.
Brother Galloway.
Dr. El-Sayed, you hit on something that's very important, right? This questioning of natural immunity versus doing something to not get sick in the first place. There's a whole lot of folks in the communities that I serve who will listen to what Rand Paul just said, and not for any political reason, but they're already nervous. And then I hear something like this, and I go, okay, cool, I can just take my chances. When we also know what the numbers are, and you could probably speak to it better than anybody. In our own community about how we survive and how we deal because of the complications that are here. I mean, the hospice care rotation in here was horrible. I have a cousin who's a traveling COVID nurse who had to wheel a wife in to say goodbye to her husband, both of them affected with COVID. And so there's a whole swath of folks who would listen to this and go, well, I'm already nervous. Oh, the natural immunity thing. Yeah, I'm going to do that because I'm nervous about everything in the world right now, and it causes a whole lot of folks to be able to use that as a quote. And so, what would you say to folks who are just nervous? I know there's the research. I know you can throw the data at them all the time, but it's not cutting through to the emotional line that's being tapped by misinformers like Rand Paul. What are some of the ways that you get to folks who are stuck in that space and going, I'm so nervous about everything. Let me just grab on the easiest thing, which tends to be misinformation because it doesn't need to worry about being real or being evidentiary at all. How are you finding ways to cut through that?
No, I really, really appreciate your point. And, again, I'll speak to my community, the Arab American community. And there's a way in which, right, we want to fight for our inclusion, but at the same time, we allow ill-meaning old white guys from in positions of power to have undue influence on the way that we think about the world. And if you just sort of think about the overall impact of senators from Kentucky on the well-being of communities of color in this country, they don't have a very good track record. And so, in some respects, I hear that that folks sort of don't want to move beyond the status quo. They say, well, the step of putting a vaccination in my arm seems to be a lot more dangerous than just engaging with the status quo. And if there's this dude here who's saying that there's this natural immunity thing, then I should be okay. But here's the point, and here's the context that I want folks to remember. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that has taken nearly 5 million lives abroad and 700,000 lives at home. Almost all of us know somebody who's lost someone, if we don't know somebody who's been lost to us because of this pandemic. This isn't a status quo moment. This is a beat the pandemic moment. And the risks of getting COVID-19, right, to get to that acquired immunity are so much worse than the risks of taking the vaccine to prevent that virus from getting into your body, from potentially taking your life, or from leaving you with side effects over the next 3 months to who knows how long. And so you've got to remember that we're doing this in context. Like if you came up to me before the pandemic and said, hey, should I take this vaccine? I'd be like, no. Why would you do that? What's the point? Here, right, in the middle of the pandemic, the whole context has changed. So the point of taking the vaccine is to prevent yourself from the risk of getting the virus, which in the course of the pandemic is substantially more likely. I also just want to speak to like the nature of anxiety. I get it, man. People are sick and tired of this thing. All of us would rather be ostriches right now. We just bury our head in the sands and pretend like this thing is over. It's not. And unless we all do the proactive thing that we can do to protect ourselves and the people around us, it's not going to be over. And you got this news now of cases are going to be on the decline. And so we should be good to go. But a lot of that implies that more people are getting vaccinated, right? And that we don't have a new variant that crops up somewhere in someone's body who's not vaccinated. That then brings us all the way back to where we were. Don't forget, we had thought that we were through with this until Delta came along. So I don't want to take my chances with the next variant. So please just do the thing that we need to do to protect ourselves in this pandemic. We don't want to be the reason why someone we love gets sick, potentially dies, or the reason why we're left worrying about some long-term complications of a disease we could have prevented in the first place.
That's right. That's right. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and Brother Reverend Anthony Galloway, thank you so much both for joining us to have this very important conversation. Dr. Sayed, you have a book and a podcast that I want the people to know about. The podcast is America Dissected, and your book is Medicare for All, A Citizen's Guide with Dr. Micah Johnson. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning.